This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So we're going to start out talking about 5 stocks that I've identified that have real attractive patterns that basically meet certain criteria using the ADX. I'm going to explain what I'm looking at in the ADX and how the criteria is slightly different depending on the time frames we're looking at. All right, so we're going to go through that, and I'm going to go through all the market conditions on the S&P and see where we stand right now as it continues to push higher towards that 7,000 mark, which I've been thinking is the target here. Once we do that, I'm going to go through a list of symbol requests that came through, and then I've got a couple of ideas, additional ideas to talk about at the end. All right, let's go ahead and get going. Okay, so I've got my 4 charts up here. Bottom left is the monthly. The bottom right is a weekly. Upper right daily. Upper left another weekly with a zigzag indicator overlaid on price. We've got relative strength, and we got the RSIs. Okay. Now, I want to show this ARM holdings because I think it's interesting the way it's playing out. You can really see with the zigzag, we're forming basically like some kind of like an inverted head and shoulders type pattern, and it's trying to break through. All right, but what's intriguing me, you can't really see this here, but the blue is the ADX line, and it's up in the mid-30s. But you can see the green and the red that it shows. Green represents the strength of the buyers. Okay, that's positive DI. Red represents the strength of the sellers. That's negative DI. So those are the 3 lines, and the ADX line is basically the difference between these two. The difference between the green line and the red line. And by the way, it doesn't care which is on top. The red could be up here and green could be down here. This line would still be up in this area. It's non-directional. It does not care whether it's a strong trend to the upside or the downside. It'll tell you whether you have a strong trend or not. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out is that on the weekly chart, which is my main chart that I focus on, using the monthly as a backdrop to really tell me if I've got something going on, you can see the weekly chart has been in a low ADX condition. That means that this line going across is a 25 line. All right, and when we spend an extended period of time below the 25 level, then we should be prepping for it's basically building energy for a move. So it's prepping for a move. And when I look at the pattern, the price pattern, I think that move is to the upside. All right, now what's missing to me is that, yeah, we've made moves through, we could draw a downtrend line, we've broken that and all that. We've made this move up through, it's basically this 75 level, 175. But what's missing, and we can even see this on a daily chart, every time we've tried to get through there, we leave a tail. It hasn't had a convincing closing bar to the upside. And I think if we have one, like a nice green bar, something, that looks something like this green bar, or one of these green bars like that, have anything that looks somewhat like convincing where everybody's on the same page and the volume is pretty good, then I think we're going to kickstart a move here. So that is something I would be on the lookout for on this particular one. CAMT, this Camtek, is another technology stock. Look at on the monthly chart, we're showing all this strength on an ADX basis, right? We had a big move to the upside, and then we pulled back to the 40-month moving average, and the ADX line has stayed well above 25. Green is well above the red. We're actually clicking in a new little MACD crossing of its signal line, and price is kicking into the upside on the monthly. So that's a really good backdrop on the monthly chart. And then on the weekly, we've had this low ADX pattern in place, and now all of a sudden it's crossing above 25 with good volume behind it. We just need a little pullback. I would be watching for some kind of a little pullback here as a potential buying opportunity in that one. And then GCT. So these are all different patterns, but they're all of them are found by me using ADX combinations, right? So this one is a strong ADX pattern. The ADX is well above 25, and then it comes down to even hold above 25 through this big drop. All right, and then look at what's happened here. Low ADX through this whole period, and now all of a sudden it's showing strength, and then it's holding the 18-week. And so we'd be using some kind of a little breakout through 30, 31, 32 as a potential buying opportunity in that one. So, the keys here, I think, are identifying that we have strength either on the monthly chart in the ADX or on the weekly chart, or we've gone through a period of forming energy, building energy for a move with a low ADX pattern, and now all of a sudden it's kicking into gear, right? So something like Riot is another one that's showing a rising ADX. Look at the volume pattern, really bullish here, and then a rising ADX on both the weekly and the monthly, right? We're merging out of a big base. That's a really good sign. Now we've got some tails here. It ought to pull back a little bit, maybe check back to the breakout area in the higher teens, but certainly a name to watch. You can see this big base emerging out of that pattern with the zigzag. And then we've got this steel stock breaking out of a low ADX pattern, 2-8 low ADX. It was low ADX on the monthly and on the weekly, and now we're getting a really strong breakout. So the rule is when you have low ADX, you draw trend lines on price and you wait for a breakout, right? So these are the types of things I'm doing and bringing up to my subscribers and sort of explaining, but this is basically emerging out of this big triangle pattern, and we're showing some pretty good strength. So really good way to identify strong names with potential, and then we go down and look at the MACD to help with our timing. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and also subscribe. So I'm on the services page of rabilstockresearch.com. At the top, you can see I've got my advanced trend and momentum courses. There's 3 different courses. You can get a discount if you buy them all as a bundle. They are lifetime access now, all right? And also, the individual package has about 3 to 4 reports that come each week, plus a special video for that package. And I also do a once-a-month webinar that is very popular with the subscribers. So you can take a look there. If you're interested in just getting started, you can go up to the top and hit the book. This will give you information on the book. It gets you started on the approach. Okay, so I'm going to go through the chart here of the market conditions. We're going to run through these, and then we're going to look at the actual indicators themselves that are creating these. But let's just start with the sentiment. We've got a pretty big jump in 1 week. There were 38% of the bulls, more bulls than bears last week, and this week we're at 44% more bulls than bears. So both the bulls jumped and the bears dropped. It's a type of signal that we start to see, we're getting up into a real cautious, higher risk area based on this indicator. Again, I use the Investors Intelligence because I've been following it for, something 30, 35 years, and I've found it to be, extremely helpful. So when we get up into this mid 40 area like this, definitely need to be a little bit more cautious. It's not a timing tool. I use it as a secondary indicator, but I still say that it's real important to keep an eye out when this thing jumps like that, all right? Overbought, oversold is up to 73 again, so we're back up into the overbought territory. It didn't take very long, so both of those are negative. Now, I use those two at the bottom as more like shorter-term signs that, market could drop, and then, but depending on what's taking place in the trend and momentum, we determine whether it's the start of something big to the downside or whether it's just a pullback. I mean, right now I would be reading it more like a pullback, not necessarily trend ending, but we'll have to see when things actually start to roll over, what these indicators look like at that point. The volatility has jumped on the daily chart into a higher risk territory, but the weekly is still in really good shape, and I think that's a pretty big positive. I'll explain to you that in a minute. And then the trend on all 3 time frames is positive. The momentum is positive on the monthly and then neutral for both the weekly and the daily. Let's go ahead and go look at the individual charts now. Okay, so this chart here on the left side, I've got the daily chart with the average true range and the overbought, oversold RSI 5. All right. Now, our ATR is a 20-period ATR, and then the moving average in purple is actually 18 MA. All right. Now, you can see what happened. We have had a really strong move to the upside with a low or declining ADX. Below its moving average. I like to use the moving average, the slope of that, to kind of tell me what's going on. That started to climb here just in the last few months, and even though price has moved to the upside, we have increasing volatility on that time frame. Now, what I've been saying is that the fact is that we're starting to move back to the upside, and we have positive, and you can see this is starting to die off. It's very possible if that continues, this will just roll over, and so will the moving average. So I'm not all that concerned about the volatility. A little, I mean, it's a little bit of a sign of concern from a short-term standpoint, but nothing all that serious. Now, when you look at this on the weekly, this is where it can get a little bit more tricky. Let's just look at what took place back here in 2022. We had a move to the upside, similar to what we're seeing now. And it's, you can see these two, the moving average lines start to separate and starting to separate. But in this case, we started to see an increase in volatility before the drop, right? And that's really kind of what I'm watching for. You can see we have declining volatility right now. We're going to need to see this climb to the upside to really signal trouble, I think. So I'm not overly concerned about what's taking place yet until we see, really going to need to see this 18-week line be broken or consolidate above and then break it with increasing volatility. I think that'll be the sign that, there's a lot more trouble on the horizon, similar to what happened in 2021. Now, I'm not going to go back and show you historically all the times that's happened, but I can tell you on a regular basis that when this line starts to increase above its moving average, it's a higher risk territory for the market. All right, now let's go and take a quick peek at the different time frames. Monthly still in a strong trend, but we made a bottoming tail, really good move off the low, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 straight months of green bars where we open near the low, close near the high. Really not much hesitation along the way. Looking for a big green bar, like a monster green bar, and that would be a sign of maybe some exhaustion. The weekly chart, as big a move as this has made, the ADX has not been able to make any kind of move. So we're on the lookout. I've been telling my subscribers, we really need to watch for this ADX line once it gets up to 25, and it could end up providing resistance because this has made such a significant move. I would think that that 25 line is going to act as resistance for the ADX. On a daily chart, we did get a little buy signal on a MACD basis with reverse divergence, and then it kicked in. Green DI is starting to play to the upside finally. But, again, I mean, I'm looking at a target right around 7,000 for the S&P, and then we're going to have to see how it reacts at that area, all right? Pretty good momentum on the hourly. I don't see any real trouble, at least in the short term. We could pull back, and I think we'd end up coming back to this high again or maybe exceeding it. So all in all, these timeframes actually look pretty good. All my comments are for educational purposes only. Please do your own research before making any investments. All right, so I want to start with this IWM, just making sure we're staying on top of it. We're going to focus on this chart here. One of the things that is a little bothersome, we broke out and got to this new high, and then we basically went into sleepy time mode. Haven't really had much follow through from that, and now we're seeing the relative strength lines start to dip down and potentially, threaten re-breaking that. And I really, if we're going to see a shift into where this is going to outperform, we're going to need to see this moving average start to rise to the upside. And then I think we could get a period where we could see outperformance from the IWM. Now, the reason why that's so important is it's a reflection on a broadening effect where more stocks are participating. The weekly report I put out for my subscribers shows that at least I think it's around 6 of the sectors are actually oversold right now. When you look at their trends, short-term patterns, the direction they're making based on a trend and momentum basis on a short-term basis. That to me it's very surprising when we've had 2 or 3 really strong weeks to the upside for the S&P. It's just very rare to see that, and that's just telling me that a lot of stocks are not participating right now. So that's why I keep following this IWM, because it's a strong reflection on that. All right, look at the TNX. I did want to take a quick peek at this, and I think we just need to keep our eye on the ball here, because I know a lot of people are talking about the drop in rates, and yeah, I mean, who knows if they're going to drop rates again. The short-term rates, they could drop, but when we start to look at this 10-year, to me, this is a consolidation on a long-term pattern with a lot of strength. It does not look like a reversal, especially if I pull up a quarterly chart. You can see that this looks like, look at this on a bigger picture pattern. Look at the declining move We had the 18 below the 40 and both lines declining for years. And now we have the 18 above the 40 with both lines rising with good momentum characteristics. And yeah, we could spend a couple more quarters coming back or consolidating back towards the 18 on that time frame. But to me, it just doesn't, I don't see any signs of this really reversing back to the downside yet. So we'd have to have a really strong bar to the downside on a quarterly basis to reverse this, I think. And I think odds really favor this starting next year, maybe starting to march to the upside and break through the 5 level. So need to be careful about distinguishing between the short-term and the long-term pattern, short-term rates versus long-term rates. All right, let's move on. I did want to mention this copper move. Notice how copper really isn't giving back at all. Now, if you go and you look at what happened to gold and silver, I mean, big, huge bars to the downside, massive retracements, and yet we're not really seeing a significant move like that in copper necessarily. So it might be time to just kind of keep an eye out on your copper. SCCO is a big copper stock, and that has held up incredibly well throughout this. Really strong overall pattern. And you can see the ADX pattern on this is actually pretty attractive. We're going to see a little bit of dip in this, but it does look interesting. All right, I got some requests. I'm going to start out with the XLE. People had a request about this. Now, the way I'm looking at this is we had this big move to the upside with pretty good momentum characteristics, and the MACD got really far away from the 0 line, right? And now we've spent all this time working sideways and doing this, and now we've got back to the 0 line, right? Not all the way, but pretty close. So we've worked off the overbought condition by going sideways here, and it would not take very much to see this move to the upside. A little bit of strength to the upside, and I think this sector could actually start to kick in and look pretty interesting. All right, I got another request for the regional banks, which have been, in the news. Definitely took a little hit here. We've lost some relative strength here in the short term. You can see that they've basically been a market performer now since the first quarter of 2023. They've just basically marched sideways with the market. We're starting to lose a little bit here recently. But what I'll say is that we've got a real key thing to watch. I've studied swing charts, the zigzag charts, and what's taken place here is we made a new low, right? And then we came back up and made a new high, marginal new high here, and now we've pulled back. So now we're at a really key level. If we were to come back down through here and break that in any significant way, then I would say this whole move is pretty much over, right? It doesn't have much of a chance of helping you out. However, if we actually don't break through that and we turn around and take out these highs, okay, then we're looking at the start of this is a power swing to the upside, all right? And I think you're going to see the relative strength improve. I think you'll see the momentum improve. If all that takes place, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. So I think it's at a really critical point right now, and I wouldn't want to make a major call unless I saw more downside back down through this these couple red bars to the downside. If we saw follow through that, then that's a negative. If we've come back up through this prior peak, then that's a pretty big positive. UBS, one of the banks as well, I think is showing pretty nice overall. This is a pretty nice overall situation. We have this low ADX condition through all this period. It was about a year long, and then we broke out of it to the upside, and now we're pulling back for the first time where we have strong ADX. So this should be a pretty good area of support. Now, I wouldn't buy just because of that. I'm going to wait for confirmation on the lower time frame. We need to get a trigger on the upside, an entry pattern. I go through this in my course in detail, what the different triggers are and how we'd enter based on this. So something to watch. Got good momentum characteristics on this time frame. Done a bad trade, but I think it's going to take a little bit of work to turn things around. It does have earnings coming. I guess it actually had earnings coming this morning, so that's a good sign. Not too bad. All right, let's look at CELH, another request that came in. So pretty decent move to the upside. I guess when I look at this, the first thing I see when I look at the monthly chart is that you had this violent move to the downside with this. You see how this big red bar shows up? That tells me that people did not have an opportunity to really exit. So I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, there's a lot of resistance right in this zone, I think. I mean, I think you're going to run into problems. You already have a little tail into that area. So I think you need to be careful about doing any buying right now. I would be a little bit more interested in this if we got a little bit better pullback or correction or something like that, and let this 18-month cup around. And then you have a lot more room up into that 70, 75 area where you could take that on with a little bit more strength behind you. I know we've got pretty good momentum, but we don't have a big base behind us. It's almost like a V-bottom, straight down then straight up. And I'd like to see some, a better look than that. Nucor, now this one to me is interesting, especially when we look at that STLD I mentioned in the first segment. Look at this move here. We broke the downtrend line, we came back and tested, and now we turned back to the upside. So now we've completed a 1, 2, 3 reversal, and we're getting back above the 18-month line. All those are pretty positive signs, I think. So certainly a stock to be on the lookout for. Maybe we should be looking at steel stocks, actually. All right, I've got a couple stocks that I think are intriguing me right now. One is this CRWV, this CORWV. It's been a stock that everybody's been talking about, but notice what this did. It crossed above the 18. The 18 was declining, but now we've tested that 18, and the 18 is acting as support now. It's starting to act as support. I think if we can do that and then come up through this 150 level, I think this could be the start of a pretty significant move. Certainly something to watch for. 150 is a key level now for me from a short-term standpoint. I think if we can break back above that, this could be real intriguing. Now, a volatile stock is this DAVE, but look at the momentum condition in this. This is a power trend on an ADX basis, and now we have a little reverse divergence in place. Certainly something to watch, I think, pretty closely for an entry. Now, I like the fact that this dipped down. We're going to need a move back above this little resistance area, but certainly one to watch. And then IDXX has been consolidating sideways after a big, strong gap up, and it was a low ADX pattern, turned into a strong ADX. We have low ADX on this time frame. It's really set itself up. If we can come back up through 650 in a really strong way, I think this could play out pretty well. Thanks for joining me. If you have any stock requests, you can send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com or just put them in the comment area below. Also, if you want to learn more about some of these techniques, you can go to my YouTube channel. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.